Yeah, you know, I was the host and I lost internet for a while.
Oh, okay.
Good morning. Welcome to Theodore Parker Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Ruth Kahn. It's been a joy to be with you all since 2016 when I needed a spiritual home. And I serve on the Music and Worship Committee as well as on the board. As we enter into worship, we bring with us all of the sorrows and joys of our week. And we know that we are held in loving community. Here we are reminded that we are part of something larger than ourselves. Here we seek to counter oppression, to work for healing and justice in a bruised and broken world. Here we invite all of you to bring your perspectives, your beliefs, your doubts, and all that is unique and wondrous about you to our service. In the spirit of love, all are welcome here. For those just joining us in person, a few things you might want to know. Our congregation is mask optional, and if you would like to be seated in an area where others are also wearing a mask, the section right under the stained glass windows on this side is reserved for people wearing masks. You can use the QR code codes at either entrance to pull up the order of service on your phone or take one of the large print copies available at either entrance. Our service is being recorded today and will be available on YouTube later. If you would like to have a joy or concern shared with the congregation today during our meditation and prayer, we will be doing that live a little bit later. People of all ages are welcome to move about in the sanctuary as they need to, or to make themselves comfortable in the cozy zone right in front of the first pew, which is usually filled with children. Today, children are invited to be with us during this whole multi-generational service. During this service, our child care provider, Shannon, is available to be with nursery-aged children in the nursery located in our parish hall. Many thanks to Joel, our camera point person today, and to Jennifer, our Zoom usher. If you are new to Theodore Parker Church or are visiting today, and we'd love to stay in touch, you're invited to fill out a connection card, which will give you an opportunity to sign up for our weekly updates and help us welcome you. A link to the connection card will be in the chat, as well as our contact information. Those joining us here in the sanctuary are encouraged to fill out a contact card you'll find in the pew within the welcome brochure. We'd like to take a moment to greet one another. For those of you on Zoom, putting your video on for this time helps us connect. Joel, will you please put our sanctuary screen in gallery view so we can see our off-site congregation? Let's give each other a big wave. Sanctuary folks, the camera is under the clock in the back. As we continue to greet one another, if online, you may post a hello in the chat. If you are physically in the sanctuary, we invite you to greet one another and say good morning. And please, ask for consent before offering a hug or a handshake. Please greet one another.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Heather Concannon. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the minister of this congregation. And our opening words this morning are from Max Coots, and they're a very fun, responsive reading. So, Joel, if you would be able to share them on the slides, I will read the plain font, and if you want to respond with the bold font, we will read these together. Let us give thanks for a bounty of people. For children who are our second planting. For generous friends with hearts and smiles as bright as blossoms. For feisty friends as hard as apples. For continuous friends who, like scallions and cucumbers, keep reminding us that we've had them.
Crotchety friends, sour as rhubarb and as indestructible.
For handsome friends as gorgeous as eggplant, as elegant as a row of corn, and the others as plain as potatoes and so good for you.
For funny friends who are as silly as Brussels sprouts and amusing as artichokes.
For serious friends as unpretentious as cabbages, as subtle as summer squash, as persistent as parsley, as delightful, as endless as Zucchini to see you through the winter.
Old friends nodding like sunflowers in the evening time, and young friends coming on as fast as radishes.
For loving friends who wind around us like tendrils and hold us despite our blights, wilts, and witherings. And for
Those friends now gone, like gardens past that have been harvested, but who fed us in their times that we might have life hereafter. For all these we give thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our opening words, opening hymn. We gather together, number 349. The music is in your gray hymnal if you would like to read music, and we will have the words projected right up here as well. Thank you. Please be seated. I invite you to join me in saying our shared covenant, once in English and once in Spanish, in honor of our sibling community in Plazuelas, El Salvador. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es nuestra oración. Esta es nuestra gran promesa, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad con amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Good morning. Wonderful to be with you all this morning. My name is Rose. I serve as this congregation's religious educator. And during this multi-generational service, Reverend Heather and I will be co-leading and doing things a little bit differently, a little bit out of, well, somewhat out of order, as we normally do. We have a story to share with you all this morning. It'll be a picture book that will be up on the big screen here. We're going to be sharing it in two parts. So I'm going to share just the first half of the book now, and we'll share the second part later in the service. So this is a really special book about the holiday that's upcoming this week, about Thanksgiving. It's called Concannon. So it's co-written by 3 Indigenous authors, including one member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribal nation. And it tells the story of the first Thanksgiving, that gathering that happened long ago, maybe happened, maybe didn't in different ways that we've probably all heard many times. And this tells it in a slightly different way. This tells that story from the perspective of the Wampanoag people, the Indigenous people, our sister nation, really, neighbors here who experienced that day. Joel, I'd love the pictures back up if you can have them. Wonderful, thank you. Before I start the story, there are just a few words I want to make sure that are used in the story. I want to share in advance that we all know what they mean. The first is Kipanamunk, so that's the title of the story, and it's the Wampanoag word for time of harvest. That's how they name this day, Thanksgiving, the time of harvest celebration. And Nukomis is grandmother. She'll be a character in our story. Turtle Island, that might be a familiar term, but it's the name used by many First Peoples to describe North America. And Wiachamum is the Wampanoag word for corn, and in this story, it really describes both corn and the spirit of corn, so not just the physical plant, but the animate being that is corn is Wiachamum. Wonderful. Here's the story. I love your garden this time of year, said Maple. Me too. What shall we pick for lunch? Nukomis asked. How about crab apples? Maple suggested. No, chokeberries, Quill shouted. Those are both good medicine, Nukomis said. How about some Wiachamum as well? Yes, Maple replied. She is such a good big sister to beans and squash. The 3 sisters, they grow together, Quill added. You're all over Turtle Island, Nukomis said, and they have many stories to tell. Can you tell us a story? Quill asked. How about the time we asked her to help the pilgrims? Almost the Thanksgiving. Maybe somewhat said we at Kipanunk, the time. One frosty fall morning, a long time ago, a large boat with white sails approached the shore. Sea circled about people. Here, who are these new people? She asked. 2 winters had passed since many of the first peoples who cared for Wiachamum had passed on to the spirit world. Those who were not taken by sickness found new homes to ease their heavy hearts and rebuild their lives. Wiachamum feared this winter would be her last and called upon Fox for help. Fox looked at Wiachamum. Should we trust these newcomers? He asked. Stay close and watch what they do, Wiachamum told Fox. Fall turned to winter. Weachemum and the other plants fell asleep. Fox watched the newcomers come ashore. He watched as they made their way into the forest. He watched them enter an abandoned Wetu. He watched them take a cooking pot and a basket of Weachemum seeds. "Don't take us away," the seeds cried. "We are waiting for the first peoples to come back in the spring and prepare our beds. We must grow first." But the newcomers could not hear the seeds. Their ears did not know the voices of the land. Fox watched the newcomers build homes on top of an empty village. He watched as they searched for food, but they could never find enough to eat. Many of the newcomers lost mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters during this long, cold winter. The first peoples watched as well. News traveled fast among nearby tribes that newcomers had arrived. Nobody was sure what to make of them. For many years, others had traveled across the sea to hunt, fish, and trade. Some were friendly, some were not. These new people were different. They were here to stay. That's part one of our story. We'll pick it up again later in the service. I'm now going to invite you all to join us in our centering hymn, which is number 101, We Give Thanks. I invite you to stay seated for this one. We'll be deepening into a space of time of prayer and meditation together. And I want to invite you all into this moment, here and now. Feel the earth, gentle gravity holding you up. Maybe take a few deeper breaths than usual. Give yourself a time of stillness. And now, as we remain seated, please join us in singing, We Give Thanks. We come into community to share our lives and our hearts with one another. One of the ways that we do this is to offer opportunities to share with each other what brings us joy, as well as what's bringing us sorrow. In our sharing, our joys are multiplied, and the burdens of our sorrows are lightened. As many of you know, we've been experimenting in worship for how to hold the space for joys and concerns in our lives. And this week, the reason why our candles are over here and I'm down here is because we're opening up an opportunity to share joys and concerns in a spoken format, as opposed to the written format that we use on other weeks. We plan to continue to do this about monthly, which has been this congregation's practice. So this morning, now, if you have a joy or concern that you would like to share, I invite you to come forward to the microphone. I'll hand you this microphone to light a candle and to share with us what's on your heart. And if you're joining us on Zoom this morning, I invite you to type your joy or concern in the chat box. I will read it and I'll light a candle for you. I now invite you to come forward to share what's on your heart. I think I'm going to actually be passing this to Reverend Heather because she has something to share with us to start us off.
Thank you, Rose. Hi, everybody. So I have a personal joy to share this morning, which is that my partner, Justin, and I are expecting a baby. Thank you. So we're expecting a baby due in May, and we're very excited. And I just also wanted to say how excited I am to be bringing this child into the world with such a loving community that will be part of its world, and how special it feels to be able to share that with all of you. So thank you. I'll light a candle for that joy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Could not be thrilled to meet this new baby and to welcome them into our congregation. Before I want to pass it to Jennifer in a minute, I want to light a candle. This is not a personal announcement. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge during our service that tomorrow is Transgender Day of Remembrance. This is a national honoring of beloved transgender siblings whose lives have been lost in acts of anti-trans violence. And we mourn their losses, known and unknown, continue to fight for the living, both to be free from violence and to experience full and abundant acceptance. So with this candle, I want to honor Trans Day of Remembrance and the memory of those lost.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I have a joy and a concern. My joy is the amazing winter fair that this congregation put on yesterday. It was so good. So much hard work. It's great being in community with you, all of you. And my concern is that my sweet Uncle Ben died yesterday while I was sitting downstairs at the and this was a guy who had a really traumatic childhood in a boys' school. And I am grateful that he's no longer in pain. And thank you.
Hello, I'm Jessica Mink, and I have a joy in that I'm leaving on Tuesday for my daughter's first hosting Thanksgiving. And she's pregnant with a child in Tennessee. And so it's my first time visiting Tennessee since I've transitioned, and it's not a happy place to be. So my sorrow is I met a friend at a conference, a new friend at a conference last week or week before, and she had to move out of Tennessee because she has 2 trans children and could not get any care for them and moved to Ohio. So the world is not simultaneously, it's a happy place and it's a really sad place. And my daughter works on Palestinian and Israeli joint environmental projects and funding them. And she's there. They were planning to have a big fundraiser in Israel, which she would have been at, except it had to get canceled. So I'm assuming she's looking for money. But right now they can't even meet Palestinians and Israelis together anymore for now. So I'm hoping that the hostage exchange or whatever ends up happening happens soon.
I'd like to light a candle in celebration of this coming Thanksgiving, which will be the first Thanksgiving that my son and his wife and children will be together because of work schedules. But I'm particularly happy this Thanksgiving because Cora, who had a really rough start, is doing well, and we're going to all be together with our extended family. So I'm really happy about that.
I have a joy and a sorrow. First of all, I'm not pregnant, which is a joy. This week I used to run a housing office for the city, and I heard from a constituent who had fled domestic violence and has 4 children. And we had moved her into an apartment in the South End, and we brought her furniture, we did whatever we could for her, and I had heard from her a few months ago saying that she was trying to move again, and I was a little upset with her for giving up this housing that we tried really hard to obtain for her in a location I personally would love to live in. And I did hear from her this week, and she told me, because I did still put her in touch with people after she sent me a text back in the spring, and she told me that she is in Maine now and safe and feels a lot better there. So that's a joy. My sorrow, though, is all the migrant families that have been coming to our state, and just reading this week and just becoming so upset that we have hundreds of millions of dollars apparently for them, and our legislature still can't do anything to help them. So I just keep those families in my mind during this holiday season and during the entire winter.
What is your name?
Katie.
Katie. Katie.
Katie.
I do too.
Oh, Deb, just a little bit of joy for a New York Times article about some young peace activists on both sides in the Middle East who are still hoping to get something done.
Though it's already been mentioned in different ways, I do want to light an additional candle. I know many of us are continuing to hold heartbreak over the violence in Israel-Palestine right now, and the children of Gaza are on my heart right now. I want to light a candle for them. And I'll light one final candle for all of the joys, concerns, sorrows, and prayers felt in our hearts. I invite you to join me now in a spirit of prayer. Oh, great mystery, Spirit of many names and no name, be with us now as we are with each other. Be with us in our joys and sorrows, in our necessary grief, and our abundant gratitude. Be with us in this hour as we hold the complexity of life in front of us, as we hold all that is exciting and new, all that is complex, hard to name, and all that brings sorrow to our wide open hearts. Great mystery, be with us here and now as we try yet again, to make sense of all of the violence, all of the brokenness in this world. Be with us as we seek healing, as we seek comfort, as we seek whatever kind of peace may be found. Great mystery, be with each of us as we are with each other, so that we know we are not alone. With hope for all that may yet be possible on our hearts, let us hold this prayer together. We will now rest into several moments of shared silence, followed by our musical meditation.
We are going to pick up our story of Kipanumak from here. So winter turned into spring. The sun warmed the earth, and the newcomers continued their search for food. Weachaman awoke from her long slumber and thanked the Creator for another season. She and her sisters, Beans and Squash, pushed through the ground and reached toward the sky. Fox returned to share what he had seen. The newcomers are hungry, Fox told the three sisters. They took Weachaman's seeds, but they don't know how to help them grow. Other animals came to hear what Fox had to say. We should help, Weachaman said. I agree, Beans said. Our home is their home now. I think we should too, said Squash. People help us grow. We must help, Deer said. We agreed to feed the people. In return, they care for the home we share. I wouldn't, said Fox. The newcomers don't know our world. Sometimes new people can seem scary, Rabbit said. The Creator tells us to help all living things. This is how the world works. Yes, Duck and Turkey agreed. It's settled, said Weachaman. We will send the first peoples to help the newcomers. Over the next few nights, Weachaman sent dreams to the first peoples with a message. Bring me and my sisters to the newcomers. They are hungry and need help. The first peoples listened. Their leader, Usamiquin, visited the newcomers. He could see that they wanted peace. Usamiquin introduced the newcomers to Tisquantum. Spring turned into summer. Tisquantum showed the newcomers how to raise Weachaman and her sisters, Beans and Squash. He taught the newcomers how to help feed fish and seaweed to Weachaman to help her grow. Soon, Weachaman's seeds pushed through the earth and climbed toward the sky. Beans wrapped around Weachaman's strong stalks. Squash stretched her vines across the ground, keeping Weachaman's bed cool and moist. Summer turned to fall. Weachaman brimmed with food. So did beans and squash. Weachaman smiled as the newcomers thanked Tisquantum and the first people for their help. Kipunamuk, the time of harvest, had come. The newcomers prepared a feast to celebrate the first year in their new home. They fired muskets in celebration. Boom, boom, boom. Usamiquin, warriors, and other First Peoples arrived. They feasted for 3 days. That meal changed both our lives and theirs forever. Many Americans call it a day of Thanksgiving. Many of our people call it a day of mourning. That's different from what we learn in school, said Maple. It was the Weachaman and the other beings of the land, sea, and sky who made the newcomers' first harvest possible. That's right, Nokomis said. This is why we pray before we eat. Well, what did the newcomers and our ancestors eat, Nokomis? Quill asked. Many things. Succotash, duck, turkey, rabbit, deer, lobster, fish, pumpkins, cranberries, boiled bread, and nasamp, Nokomis said. All this talk about food is making me hungry, Maple said. Let's go make us some lunch then, Nokomis laughed. And we'll enjoy every bite, said Quill. I believe that's the end. Thank you for listening to our story. I'm going to invite Ruth forward to share our offering.
Generosity is a spiritual practice in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and shared space, sacred space too. We give with gratitude for all that we have been given and with the faith that together we have more than enough. Links to donate will be in the chat, or you can take a meditative moment writing out a check, sending it to the church after the service. Ushers will be coming around the sanctuary to collect an offering for those in the pews who wish to donate something more tangible. Our TPC singers will now sing Thanksgiving Song by Mary Chapin Carpenter.
Over the course of our lives, grief enters our hearts in many ways, writes psychotherapist Francis Weller in his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. Though most of us are familiar with grief as a way to name the sadness that we feel after losing someone or something that we love, there are many other sources of grief in our lives that often get little to no attention in modern culture. Our culture that loves to always move forward, onward and upward, with no time to consider the slow depths that each of us inevitably carry. Weller writes that because of this cultural denial of grief, there are many forms of grief that remain untouched within us, accumulating and weighing us down. Turning towards the fullness of our grief, fighting against that denial, feeling our grief's full dimensions, on the other hand, often allows us to metabolize our suffering, to widen our capacity to hold the fullness of life and to feel ever more fully, ever more poignantly, our gratitude for all that is. It's with that frame that Reverend Heather and I will be sharing some reflections back and forth on the complicated holiday ahead of us this week. This day, many of us celebrate as Thanksgiving, and as our story reminded us, that many also hold as a day of mourning. Many of us look forward to sharing good food with family and friends this week and to uplifting all we are grateful for. And we know that also making space for the grief present on this day, whether that is personal grief for those that we miss, or collective and ancestral grief for all that makes this day a day of mourning for our Indigenous siblings. Being present with that grief will always expand our capacity to feel gratitude, to feel beauty and sacredness and connection. So we'll be trading off reflections this morning. First, Reverend Heather has some things to say about how she feels ancestral grief as it shows up on this holiday. I'll speak to personal grief, and each of us will speak to how gratitude is present and expansive on this day.
Thanks, Rose, for that lovely introduction. As I imagine might be true for many people in this room, I wrestle with how to make meaning of this Thanksgiving holiday. Thanksgiving can be a lovely meal of beloved friends or family. It can also be a complex meal with beloved friends or family. But it's also a holiday that is rooted in a complex and painful story. Have any of you been grappling with these questions? So today, as we grapple with the complexity and the history of the Thanksgiving holiday, I just want to say that I trust that as a community, we have the spiritual muscles to maybe feel a little uncomfortable in the service of growing, and that we also have the spiritual capacity to hold multiple truths about this day, that we can hold the grief and the gratitude and lean into wrestling with that complexity together. Can we do that? So, like many of us, I grew up cutting out construction paper buckle hats and cornucopias in elementary school, hearing stories of the Pilgrims and the Indians, the indigenous people as we called them back then, having a pleasant meal to celebrate their cooperation and friendship in Plymouth in 1621. And then the story just ended there. And I grew up in Massachusetts. Actually, all of my ancestors on both sides of my family have been in Massachusetts since they immigrated here. Mostly Irish working class folks arriving here in the 20th century, actually many settling here in West Roxbury. But not exclusively. My mom confirmed for me recently that this Thanksgiving story is more personal than I realized. The offhand comment that I once heard from my grandfather that we had ancestors on the Mayflower was actually true, and therefore that they were part of the first Thanksgiving. And growing up here on this land where this story took place, I never even wondered why the story ended with the meal and I wasn't aware of Indigenous people living here in Massachusetts. It wasn't until recently that I learned that there are still 2 federally recognized tribes in Massachusetts. And I never asked what happened after the first Thanksgiving, probably until I was late teens or early adulthood. The story just seemed to happily end, and several centuries passed, and the Indigenous people somehow quietly disappeared from the story. Did you grow up with this story as well? And we know that that's not the whole story, right? We know that that story has been sanitized because the real story is so painful. We know that there were massacres, burning of crops and food supplies, there was manipulation, disease, and that in just a few generations after the first Thanksgiving, 90% of the Indigenous population in North America had been killed by massacres and diseases brought from Europe. And it is no wonder that the Indigenous peoples refer to that holiday, the holiday that most Americans call Thanksgiving, as the day of mourning. And now, in learning more about the real story, I feel grief. I feel, as Francis Weller describes, a form of ancestral grief. He says it's the grief that we carry in our bodies from the sorrows experienced by our ancestors. And though each of us arrived to this story from different identities and experiences, for me, as a white person who has benefited from the legacy of settler colonialism, and as someone whose own ancestors were the settlers in this story, I feel the grief of lives lost, and I feel that paired with the weight of responsibility for my ancestors' parts in the genocide and the horrors of this story. I feel the weight of the ongoing need for reconciliation and repair, and the grief of colonization, the grief of disconnection from land and ancestry. And I feel a helplessness at wondering how to repair something that happened 400 years ago, but whose effects we're still feeling today. And I find myself many years on this day wondering, how do I hold this grief? How do I make sense of the origin of this holiday, even though it's been reframed as a time to focus on gratitude, which is also always a worthwhile practice? And do the people at the table with me feel this tension also? And sometimes I notice the urge in myself and in others to deny the magnitude of this complexity, to lean away from it instead of leaning in. So Rose, I shared a little bit about how ancestral grief shows up on this day. Where might personal grief show up on this day?
Thank you, Reverend Heather. This Thursday will be the 3rd Thanksgiving that my family celebrates without my mother. Though I have missed her for every single one of the days since her death 2.5 years ago, there is something particular about these holiday celebrations that make the loss feel fresh and new and on the surface. I'm sure that any of you who have lost loved ones know what I'm speaking to. Everything is heightened on special days, and so even if we've gotten used to the face missing around the dinner table or the steady animal presence at our feet, during our regular life, in the time outside of time that is a holiday celebration, each of our losses is more painfully felt. That perhaps is the most obvious way that personal grief shows up on Thanksgiving or in any other holiday gathering, but I think that it's not the only one. In The Wild Edge of Sorrow, the book we've been referencing, Francis Weller speaks to one of the sources of grief that is often unacknowledged. He names this as one of the gates of grief, what we expected but did not receive. What he writes, which I very much believe, is that we each enter this world with certain expectations and needs coded into our beings. The need to be loved exactly as we are, the need to be seen and held in our specific way of being throughout our lives, the need to have a range of deep relationships. The culture that we live in now is fractured in many ways, a reality that I think is not separate from the history of violence that Reverend Heather spoke to. And in this context, it is often a rare gift to feel seen and accepted as our full selves, especially by our family of origin. If you have felt that kind of fracturing on a personal level, perhaps through rejection or even not quite full acceptance by your family of origin, or if you are feeling cut off from community and don't know where you'll celebrate this holiday meal with or whom, or don't feel that deeply connected with those with whom you plan to gather, I think it's important and powerful to name those experiences as sources of personal grief as well. As Weller writes, at the core of this grief is our longing to belong, a longing that is so sacred and so important to honor.
Rose, you were so right in your introduction that the more that we acknowledge our grief, the more we can feel the fullness of our gratitude. And as you said, expand our capacity to feel beauty and sacredness and connection. So for me, acknowledging the parts of this day that feel the most painful historically also allows me to honor the healers, the resistance, the efforts toward reconciliation. Because as Francis Weller reminds us, for each experience of grief, there is also a corresponding experience of gratitude. And I'm thinking about this question of what would ancestral gratitude look like in response to the grief that I feel, the ancestral grief that I feel. And I think that looks like many things. I think it looks like, I think of the legacies of resistance and resilience of all those people, and especially the indigenous peoples on this land who resisted colonization, who fought back, who to this day fight for cultural survival and preservation and dignity. And though I am not a descendant of those people, as I said earlier, I am grateful for the legacies of resistance and cultural survival that inspires me today. And I'm also grateful for all of those people who may have benefited from the legacy of settler colonialism, who are choosing to take a critical look at history, where the world tells us we can just ignore it in favor of the status quo, and the people who turn their backs on the status quo to tell the true story. The truth tellers, the justice seekers, the healers, the repairers. I'm particularly thinking of the work of those in this congregation who have asked for an opportunity to think carefully about what it means to do a land acknowledgement in worship, what action beyond words we are called to in order to be in right relationship with the people who first inhabited this land, the Massachusetts people and others. And I'm grateful for all of those who have taught me to hold complexity, who have shown me over and over that we can feel a range of emotions, joy and grief and dismay and gratitude and connection and longing, all on the very same day at the very same event. Rose, on this day, what are you feeling grateful for?
I so appreciate that question. As we keep saying, when our grief is acknowledged so that it may be seen, so that it may be metabolized, we know that our capacity for gratitude expands. I feel my love for my family, my dear friends, and all of the connection in my life that is still possible so much more fully and poignantly when I don't turn away from my grief. In this moment, I feel such gratitude for all of you, for the expansive and deep community that we are building together, for our ability to welcome new life and new possibility together, evermore, because we know our heartbreak and our complexity will also be honored when we gather. It's not a simple thing to be human in these times, to face the realities of our fractured culture and the centuries of cultural misalignment and violence that got us to this moment. And still, here we are. Here we are in the work of healing together. Here we are preparing to enjoy good food and good company in our holiday celebrations this week. Here we are, continuing to be human, continuing to love our children and our partners, our family and our friends. Here we are, continuing to do our very best to build beloved community together. May it be so. I hope you'll join us now in singing our closing hymn, number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Please rise and embody your spirit as we sing. The words will be on your screen or in the hymnal.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
I just have a quick announcement. I'm Cindy Bergeron, and I'm the chair of the board this particular year. And I want to just echo what Jennifer Johnson said to us about the winter fair yesterday. It was really phenomenal. And the thing that impresses me is how much this was a community affair. And so many people helped. I won't even try to name people who were in charge of things because, with a couple of exceptions, because so many of you took part. And, you know, in terms of giving things, in terms of preparing, the endless hours that went into planning, to organizing, to getting vendors, to getting people to come to the fair and so forth and so on. It's just an amazing thing about this community that we have, and seeing all the people who attended yesterday and so forth. I do want to mention, though, that the other two Jennifers, Jennifer Bottomley and Jennifer Bookwald, were particularly, along with Carol Allen, were particularly important in getting this going and keeping it going for months. without them, unless somebody else was willing to give their life over to this event, we wouldn't have had a winter fair. And this was a really important fundraiser. You'll be hearing, maybe by next week, we'll be able to give you a final amount of what we made on it. But it was not only just important in terms of our budget, which is always important, but also it's important in terms of a community building activity. And, you know, people had fun yesterday. So thank you three especially for all that you've done for this. And I'll be quiet after that. I was going to maybe name a couple of other sidekicks that you had, but I'll be missing people. So thanks again. And for those of you who didn't get a chance, or even if you did get a chance yesterday, there's a little bit of a repeat of the fair on a smaller scale today. So when you go to coffee hour, there are things for sale, including frozen soups and jewelry and other items. And very importantly, down on the lower level, down in the nursery area, there are books for sale that are UUA books, and Kathy Ware is taking care of that. So take advantage of that opportunity. Okay.
So as Cindy said, please do join us for coffee hour in the parish hall next door, or stick around for breakout rooms if you are on Zoom. And with that, we will close with our closing words. Friends, may we honor our grief so that we may become more grounded in gratitude. Gratitude for time to gather with loved ones over a meal. Gratitude for the ability to bring the complexity to the table. Gratitude for legacies of resistance and justice seeking. Gratitude for choosing what legacies we want to pass along. Gratitude for all of the ways that love is calling us onward, beckoning us toward beloved community. May it be so, and amen.